Namaste, 9th standard. We will today continue the portrait of a lady written by Kushwant Singh. Here, Kushwant Singh has described about his grandmother very beautifully, about her devotion and her life, the relationship between him and his grandmother, and the relationship between the animal and birds. So, what he has tried to say is, see, we old people, when we get older, our priority, our criteria changes. So, that's what he wanted to say. We'll start. My grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that I had known her. People said that she had once been young and pretty and even had a husband. But that was hard to believe. My grandfather's portrait was hung above the mantelpiece in a drawing room. He wore a big turban and loose fitting clothes. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest, and he looked at least 100 years old. He did not look the sort of person who would have a wife and children. He looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. As for my grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child that seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part, and we treated it like a fables of the prophet she used to tell us. So the first part of the paragraph in this lesson describes about his grandmother and grandfather. Now the grandmother is alive, but grandfather had died long back. Only thing they have, grandfathers, is the portrait, a picture photo of a grandfather in their living room. How he looked, he had a long beard which covered his almost part of the chest. As usual, even six have, they used to keep long beards. So the same way, his grandfather, Kushwant Singh grandfather, had a very long beard which covered his chest, and he didn't look like as if he had only just wife and children. He looked as if he has only grandchildren. That means he looked very old. He looked as if he is 100 years old. So, like his grandmother is also old. She is her face is wrinkled since 20 years. He is looking. It looks as if she is wrinkled since 20 years. That is a usual face of old people. Now, she used to tell the stories of how she used to play with other children when she was a child, and what and all things they used to do. These things she used to tell to the grandchildren of hers, but the grandchildren never believed her. They had a thinking that uh, she never had been child. She is old. Since long time she is old. So this is the thinking of the grandchild, that is Kushwant Singh. So, and they even used to think that grandchildren, that is Kushwant Singh and his cousins and all, they used to think that she is telling like these are the fables or stories of old, as she used to tell the stories of the prophets and all. So same way she is telling these stories. This is not truth. Whatever she is saying is not truth. And one more thing, and they thought that Whatever she is saying is undignified on her part to tell about her childhood, but that is their thinking is, grandchildren's thinking is, she never had been child. She is old. And next para says about she had always been short and fat and slightly bent. Her face was a crisscross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. No, we were certain she had always been, as we had known her, old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. She could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. She hobbled about the house in spotless white with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop and the other telling the beads of her rosary. Her silver locks were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face, and her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. Yes, she was beautiful. She was like the landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. So, this is all about the description of his grandmother. So, how she looked? She was old. Her face was wrinkled. Everywhere there were lines, crisscross lines, and wrinkles all over her face. She looked very old. The author is telling she had been old since long time, since 20 years. She must be old. She had a stature of a short and fat figure. So she was short and fat. She used to wear white dress, spotless white dress, and she used to walk very fast, and her back is a little bit bent. And one more thing, she never used to stop chanting prayers, but the prayers they could not hear it. She silently chanted the prayers, inaudible prayers, one hand on her hip, and in one hand she used to keep a rosary, and she used to do the unaudible prayers. She had all her hair was all whitened, that is every it was gray. So but still she looked very beautiful. There is a difference between he has said, the author has said, she was never been pretty, but he says she is beautiful. What is the difference between pretty and beautiful? You can be pretty from the face, but beauty comes within. For beautiful, for a beautiful person, you can say that person is very beautiful. How you say that? That means beauty comes from the heart, from your nature, from your manners. That comes if your soul is beautiful, you can say that okay, that person is very beautiful. You cannot say that person is pretty. So here the author says his grandmother is very beautiful. That means she is of a very good soul. Her attitude, her nature, everything was very good. That is why he says she was very beautiful. She was like the landscape in the mountains. So in the mountains there used to be landscape very beautiful to see. So he has compared his grandmother to the landscapes in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity, a beautiful woman with serenity and peace and contentment. She is, by looking at her, you get a peace of mind, a contentment, a satisfaction in yourself. So, this is what he has said about his grandmother. And third para, my grandmother and I were good friends. My parents left me with her when They went to live in the city and we were constantly together. She used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for school. She said her morning prayer in a monotonous sing song while she bathed and dressed me in the hope that I would listen and get a know it by heart. I listened because I loved her voice, but never bothered to learn it. Then she would fetch my wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk, a tiny earthen ink pot, and a red pen, tie them all in a bundle, and hand it to me. After a breakfast of thick, stale chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it, we went to school. She carried several stale stuffed chapatis with her for the village dogs. So, what she used to do? Now, the grandmother and the grandson, that is Kushwant Singh, they, as Kushwant Singh's parents were living in city, they have left Kushwant Singh with his grandmother. So they were good friends and they lived it together. They were constantly together. So she used to wake him up, and she used to make him ready for the school. How she used to make him ready for the school? They have said, see. She said her morning prayers in monotonous sing song. She continuously saying the morning prayers even while she gave him bath and she dressed him up. Then also she used to say these prayers. Why she used to say these prayers is just because she wanted Kushwant Singh to learn it by heart. But Kushwant Singh, what he used to do, he used to listen to these prayers, but he never learned it. Why he did not learn it? Because he liked her voice, that is why he listened to the prayers, but he never tried to learn the prayers what she was chanting. I listened because I loved her voice, but never bothered to learn it. Then she would fetch my wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk. So she had kept everything ready, his chalk, his pencils, his bundle of pens, everything, ink pot, everything she used to keep ready. And while getting out from the house, she used to pack the after doing the breakfast, she used to pack some stale chapatis with her with sugar and butter and sugar spread on it. And they went to the school. The school is beside the temple. Now she used to carry almost many stale chapatis with her so that while returning from the school and temple, they can distribute, they can throw it to the street dogs. Fourth para. My grandmother always went to school with me because the school was attached to the temple. The priest taught us the alphabet and the morning prayer, while the children sat in rows on either side of the veranda, singing the alphabet or the prayer in chorus. My grandmother sat beside reading the scriptures. When we had both finished, we would walk back together. This time, the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. They followed us to our home, growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis we threw on them. So, how they go to school? After finishing the breakfast, after getting ready, they straight away went to the school, which is nothing but the school is beside the temple. The priest used to teach them alphabets as well as prayers. The children used to sit in the both side of the verandas where they learned the alphabets as well as this prayers and all. And on the other side, his grandmother used to read the scriptures. And after finishing the school, and grandmother also finishes her reading the scriptures and all, she finishes it, and at the evening time they start from the school come temple. So when they start from the temple, the dogs, street dogs, approach them and they start fighting for the chapatis grandmother used to throw at them. So fifth para. When my parents were comfortably settled in the city, they sent for us. That was a turning point in our friendship. Although we shared the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. I used to go to English school in a motor bus. There were no dogs in the streets, and she took to feeding sparrows in the courtyard of our city house. So, when then the time came that his parents, Kushwant Singh's parents, um, Kushwant Singh's parents, they they had settled in the city, so they called Kushwant Singh and his grandmother together to settle in the city itself. So what happened afterwards? The friendship became less. It was a turning point in the friendship. When was the turning point in the friendship? If this question is asked, then you have to answer when Kushwant Singh, his parents called them to the city. His parents called Kushwant Singh and his grandmother to the city. When they moved to the city, the friendship got turning point as Kushwant Singh joined English medium school, and the motor vehicle used to pick the child to the school, and he learnt English in the school. It was the turning point. Though they stayed in the same, they shared a single room, still there was less conversation, there was less contact with the grandmother and Kushwant Singh. So there were no dogs in the streets. So now they don't go by walk. Kushwant Singh goes by motor vehicle, so there is no dogs. What she did, the grandmother, now she can't feed the street dogs, she took it for feeding the sparrows. So she started feeding the sparrows which come in the verandas of the houses. So till here, read it and learn it. Remaining I will do it in my next video. Till then, take care. Namaste.